Silent Pillars. Olivia Reed arrived at the Westfield Innovations headquarters precisely 45 minutes before anyone else, as she had done for the past 3 years. The security guard nodded his usual greeting as she swiped her badge, her practical heels clicking against the marble floor of the empty lobby. "Morning, Thomas," she said, handing him a paper cup. "Green tea, 1 sugar." "You're a lifesaver, Ms. Reed," he replied with genuine appreciation. "Mr. Westfield already called." "Twice?" Olivia checked her watch. 5:47 a.m. She sighed. Of course he did. By the time the elevator reached the executive floor, Olivia had mentally prepared herself for another day of invisible service to Dominic Westfield, CEO and founder of the fastest-growing tech company in the Pacific Northwest. She organized her thoughts like she organized his schedule, with precision and without emotion. The glass doors to his office were already open, and she could see him pacing, phone pressed to his ear, his tailored suit impeccable despite the early hour. At 38, Dominic exuded the confidence of someone who had built an empire from nothing but brilliant code and relentless ambition. "I don't care what time it is in Tokyo," he was saying, his voice sharp. "The Nakamura deal needs to close today." He glanced up, noticing Olivia setting his preferred breakfast, black coffee and protein bar, on his desk. He gave no acknowledgement as she silently placed his updated schedule beside it. Olivia retreated to her desk outside his office, immediately, diving into the 67 emails that had arrived overnight. Behind her competent exterior was a mind that understood not just schedules and coffee preferences, but market trends and product development strategies. With her master's degree, in business analytics, Olivia could have been in a corner office herself. Instead, she found herself filing reports for a man who barely remembered her name on good days. "Reed," Dominic's voice came through the intercom. Not Olivia. Never Olivia. "The board presentation needs complete restructuring. The quarterly projections look weak." "I'll take care of it," she replied evenly, already pulling up the files. What he didn't know was that she had anticipated this request yesterday and had worked until midnight preparing alternative slides. By mid-morning, the office hummed with activity. Executives in identical dark suits hurried past Olivia's desk, each offering her the same strained smile, the kind reserved for someone considered part of the furniture. She fielded calls, rerouted complaints, and buffered Dominic from unnecessary interruptions, all while finessing the board presentation. During the lunch hour, when most employees escaped to nearby cafes, Olivia ate her salad at her desk, using the quiet time to review industry reports. Something caught her attention. A small tech blog mentioning security vulnerabilities in software eerily similar to Westfield's flagship product. She hesitated, then printed the article. Dominic didn't appreciate unsolicited input, but this seemed important. When she entered his office, he was staring intensely at financial projections on his monitor. "Your updated presentation, Mr. Westfield," she said, placing the folder before him, "and this article might be of interest." She slid the printout. Beside it, he barely glanced up. "Anything else?" Olivia paused. "The article mentions security concerns that could potentially, if I want technology analysis, I'll ask my development team." He cut her off, his tone dismissive. "That will be all." That evening, as Olivia prepared to leave, she noticed Dominic still in his office, tension visible in his shoulders as he spoke with Julian Parker, the chief financial officer. "We're looking at a record quarter, Dominic," Julian was saying. "The Nakamura deal alone will boost shares by 15%. Dominic nodded, but Olivia noticed he kept glancing at the article she'd given him, now marked with his notes. For a brief moment, his eyes met hers through the glass. For once, he seemed to actually see her. As she gathered her things, her phone buzzed with a news alert. "Tech security breach concerns rattle investor confidence." The storm was coming, and only she had seen the first raindrops. Tomorrow would not be an ordinary day at Westfield Innovations, and for Olivia Reed, the invisible assistant, everything was about to change. Tremors of change. The headline exploded across financial news networks by 9 a.m. Major security vulnerability discovered in Westfield Innovations' core product. The company's stock plummeted 17% before the market had been open an hour. Olivia arrived that morning to chaos. The reception desk was overwhelmed with calls, and the usual quiet of the executive floor had transformed into frantic energy as department heads huddled in glass-walled conference rooms, faces grim. With concern, Dominic's office had become command central. When Olivia entered, he was surrounded by the executive team, all speaking over one another. "How did we miss this?" Julian Parker demanded, waving printouts of technical reports. "The development team should have caught this months ago." "The vulnerability affects less than 5% of our code," argued Veronica Tam, the chief technology officer. "But the media's acting like we've left every client's data exposed to hackers." Dominic stood at the window, his back to the room, staring out at the Seattle skyline. When he turned, Olivia noticed something she'd never seen before: uncertainty in his eyes. "Reed," he said, noticing her in the doorway, "cancel everything on my calendar for the next 3 days. We need to focus entirely on damage control." "Already done," she replied calmly. "I've also prepared a preliminary media response statement and contacted our top 20 clients personally to assure them we're addressing the situation." She placed a folder on his desk. "This includes the complete technical assessment I requested from the development team at 5 a.m., along with 3 potential solutions." The room fell silent. Everyone stared at her, including Dominic, whose expression shifted from surprise to something resembling respect. "You read that article yesterday," he said quietly. "The one I dismissed." Olivia simply nodded. Over the next 72 hours, Westfield Innovations became a fortress under siege. Investors demanded explanations, clients threatened to terminate contracts, and the press circled like vultures. The executive team worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and desperation. By the 3rd day, exhaustion had settled over everyone. One by one, the crisis team drifted away to catch a few hours of sleep, until only Dominic and Olivia remained in the conference room, surrounded by empty coffee cups and discarded strategies. "The board meeting is at 9 a.m., Olivia reminded him, organizing the presentation materials. "You should try to rest beforehand." Dominic rubbed his eyes. For the first time, his perfect appearance had slipped. His tie loosened, stubble darkening his jaw, fatigue evident in every movement. "I've been thinking about something," he said unexpectedly. "You warned me, and I ignored you. Why did you still work so hard to help fix this?" The question caught Olivia off guard. "It's my job," she answered automatically. "No," Dominic shook his head. "Your job is to manage my schedule and field my calls, not to come up with crisis management strategies or contact our top clients before being asked." He studied her with newfound curiosity. "You care about this company." "I believe in what we're building here," she admitted, "and I know how hard you've worked to build it." The confession hung in the air between them, shifting something fundamental in their dynamic. The next morning brought more devastation. As they walked into the boardroom, Julian Parker intercepted them, his face ashen. "Nakamura pulled out," he said in a low voice. "And they're not alone. We've lost 4 major investors since yesterday. The board meeting was brutal. Accusations flew as board members demanded accountability. Halfway through, Eleanor Winters, the board chairwoman, raised her hand for silence. "The situation is clear," she announced coldly. "This failure of oversight has cost us millions. The board has lost confidence in the current leadership." Her gaze fixed on Dominic. "We're bringing in crisis management from outside. Effective immediately, your authority over daily operations will be restricted." The room erupted in discussion. Olivia watched Dominic's face, expecting anger or defiance. Instead, she saw something worse. defeat. As they left the boardroom, executives who had once competed for Dominic's attention now avoided his gaze. In the elevator, Julian looked at his phone rather than at his longtime friend and CEO. "I have a dinner with Harrington Capital tonight," Julian said awkwardly. "I should prepare—" "Of course," Dominic replied tonelessly. "Everyone needs to protect their own interests now." By evening, the executive floor was deserted except for Dominic in his office, staring at his computer screen showing the continuing fall of Westfield's stock price. Olivia finished arranging the next day's crisis meetings, then paused at his door. "Would you like me to order dinner before I leave?" she asked. Dominic looked up, seeming surprised she was still there. "You should go home, Reed. There's no reason for you to go down with this ship." "I'm not going anywhere," she replied simply. He studied her for a long moment. "Why?" Olivia considered the man before her, not the untouchable CEO she'd worked for these past years, but someone facing the possible destruction of everything he'd built. "Because I think we can fix this," she said with quiet conviction, "and because everyone deserves someone in their corner when things fall apart." For the first time in 3 years, Dominic Westfield truly looked at Olivia Reed, not as his assistant, but as a person standing steadfast while others fled. "Thank you," he said, the words clearly unfamiliar on his tongue. That night, as they worked side by side on a recovery strategy, the dynamic between them shifted from employer and employee to something neither of them could yet define: allies in the midst of a storm that threatened to sweep away everything they knew. Glimpses through. Crack's morning light filtered through the blinds of Dominic's office, where empty takeout containers and crumpled papers evidenced their all-night strategy session. Olivia awoke with a start, finding herself curled up on the office sofa. Across from her, Dominic was already awake, studying their notes from the night before. "You snore," he said without looking up. "Just slightly." Olivia straightened, embarrassed. "I don't snore." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Believe what you want, Reed." This small moment of normalcy felt strangely precious amid the crisis. Olivia checked her watch, 6:15 a.m. "The crisis management team arrives at 8, she reminded him, gathering her things to freshen up before the day began. "I've been thinking about our approach," Dominic said, stopping her before she reached the door. "The board wants me sidelined, but they're wrong. We need to take control of the narrative." Olivia turned back. "What are you suggesting?" "Everyone's focused on damage control. I want to go further. Complete transparency, a full system redesign, and a public pledge to set new industry standards for security." His eyes held an intensity she recognized. The visionary beneath the businessman was resurfacing. "It's risky, but if it works, it could transform the crisis into an opportunity," she finished, understanding immediately. "You'd be positioned as a leader in security reform rather than another CEO covering up failures." He nodded, studying her with new appreciation. "Exactly." When the crisis management team arrived, led by a stern consultant named Richard Powell, they presented their conservative approach: minimal acknowledgement, quiet fixes, and careful messaging to rebuild investor confidence gradually. Dominic listened politely, then stood. "Thank you, gentlemen, but we're going in a different direction." He outlined his bolder strategy, while Powell's expression shifted from surprise to dismay. "With all due respect, Mr. Westfield, the board hired us to minimize damage," Powell objected. "What you're proposing could further alarm investors." "I founded this company on innovation, not fear," Dominic replied firmly. "Ms. Reed and I will present our alternative to the board this afternoon." After the consultants left, clearly displeased, Olivia raised an eyebrow. "The board might not support this." "Then I'll remind them who built this company," he said, his familiar confidence returning. "We have work to do." Throughout the day, they refined their strategy, working with a selected team of loyal developers and communications specialists. Olivia marveled at how seamlessly they now collaborated, Her suggestions met not with dismissal, but with thoughtful consideration. During a rare, quiet moment, as they reviewed the presentation, Dominic unexpectedly asked, "Where did you study business analytics?" Surprised by his interest in her background, Olivia answered, "Georgetown. I specialized in technological innovation forecasting." "And you chose to be an assistant?" There was no judgment in his tone, only curiosity. Olivia considered her answer, carefully. "My father's health was failing when I graduated. I needed stability, not risk. This position offered that." She paused. "I planned to move into strategy eventually, but what? Life happens. You adapt." She shrugged, uncomfortable with his attention. "We should finish the presentation." Dominic didn't press, but later that day she caught him viewing her LinkedIn profile on his computer. The board meeting was tense. Eleanor Winters made her opposition clear immediately. "This approach acknowledges far more culpability than necessary." "It acknowledges reality," Dominic countered, "and offers a path forward that can restore trust." The debate grew heated until Olivia, who had remained silent throughout, spoke up. "May I?" she asked, looking at Dominic. When he nodded, she stood, addressing the board directly. "You're all focused on stock prices today. Mr. Westfield is focused on where Westfield Innovations will stand in 5 years. Her voice was steady, her data impeccable as she presented market analysis, showing how companies that had weathered similar crises with transparency ultimately emerged stronger. When she finished, the room was silent. Eleanor Winters studied her with new interest. "You've been his assistant for how long?" 3 years. "Interesting." Eleanor looked between them. "Very well, Mr. Westfield. You have 1 week to implement your strategy. If we don't see improvement by then, we reconsider our options." After the meeting, they returned to Dominic's office in silence. Finally, he turned to her. "Thank you for that." "I just presented the facts," she replied. "No." He shook his head. "You believed in the approach. You believed in me." He hesitated. "Why?" The question hung between them, weighted with something neither was ready to name. "Because I've watched you build something remarkable," she said. Finally, "You deserve the chance to save it." That evening, as they worked late again, Dominic ordered dinner from an upscale restaurant rather than their usual takeout. When it arrived, he insisted they eat properly at the conference table rather, then hunched over desks. "Tell me something I don't know about you," he said as they ate. Olivia looked up, surprised. "What do you want to know?" "Anything. Everything." He leaned back, studying her. 3 years. And I realize I know nothing about you except that you're extraordinarily competent and apparently don't require sleep." She laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to please him. "I paint," she offered, "mostly abstracts, and I have a ridiculous collection of vintage science fiction novels." "You don't seem like a science fiction person." "What kind of person do I seem like?" she challenged. He considered her thoughtfully. "Someone who sees more than she says. Someone who could probably run this company better than half the executives." The candid assessment caught her off guard. "You're different," she observed. "Since the crisis began." "Am I?" He twirled his wine glass. "Or are you just seeing parts of me that were always there?" The question lingered between them as they returned to work. Later, when Dominic stepped away to take a call, Olivia noticed a framed photograph on his desk she'd never paid attention to before. A much younger Dominic with an elderly woman, both smiling widely. When he returned, he caught her, looking at it. "My grandmother," he said quietly. "She raised me after my parents died, remortgaged her house to fund my first startup." His voice softened. "She believed in me when no one else did." "She would be proud of you," Olivia said gently. "Not just for what you've built, but for fighting to save it. Something vulnerable flickered across his face, a glimpse through the cracks of his carefully constructed facade. For the first time, Olivia saw not Dominic Westfield, CEO, but simply Dominic, a man fighting for his legacy, carrying wounds and dreams she was only beginning to understand. As midnight approached, they finalized their strategy for the coming days. When Olivia stood to leave, gathering her things, Dominic walked her to the elevator, something he'd never done before. "Get some actual sleep tonight," he advised. "Tomorrow we start rebuilding." As the elevator doors closed between them, Olivia realized with startling clarity that something fundamental had shifted. In the midst of professional chaos, they were seeing each other, truly seeing each other, for the first time. Rebuilding foundations, the press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m., giving them precious little time to prepare. Olivia arrived at the office at 5, surprised to find Dominic already there, looking more composed than he had in days. He'd shaved. His suit was impeccable once more, but something about him remained changed, a new openness in his expression when he looked up at her arrival. "I brought breakfast," she said, setting down coffee and pastries. "Real food, not protein bars." "Trying to fatten me up before throwing me to the wolves?" he asked, the hint of humor in his voice still unfamiliar enough to surprise her. "The press aren't wolves," she replied, arranging his notes. "They're just people doing their jobs," says the woman who once described Tech Insider's Gillian Reeves as a piranha with a journalism degree. Olivia looked up, startled. "You remember that?" "I remember more than you think," he said quietly. The moment was interrupted by the communications team arriving, bringing with them the nervous energy of people whose careers might depend on the next few hours. The plan was bold. Dominic would publicly announce not just a fix for the security vulnerability, but a complete overhaul of their security protocols, offering free upgrades to all clients and establishing an independent security review board. They made final preparations in the conference room adjacent to where the press waited. Dominic suddenly seemed hesitant. Olivia watched him adjust his tie repeatedly, a nervous gesture she'd never seen before. "Second thoughts?" she asked quietly, stepping closer so others wouldn't hear. "What if this doesn't work?" His voice was low. "What if transparency isn't enough?" The vulnerability in his question made something shift in her chest. Without thinking, she reached out and straightened his tie herself, her fingers brushing against his collar. "Then we'll figure out the next step," she said simply. "But this is the right thing to do." He caught her hand before she could pull it away, holding it for just a moment. "Stay close during the press conference," he said. "I want you where I can see you." The press conference began tensely, with journalists clearly prepared for corporate evasion. Instead, they were met with Dominic's unvarnished acknowledgement of the company's failures. "We missed something critical," he stated clearly, "and that's on me. As CEO, the ultimate responsibility for security oversights rests with my leadership." From her position at the side of the room, Olivia watched reporters exchange surprised glances. This was not the arrogant, defensive response they'd expected. "Today, we're announcing the Westfield Security Initiative," Dominic continued, outlining their comprehensive plan. As he spoke, his confidence grew, his natural charisma emerging once more. Whenever he seemed to hesitate, his eyes found Olivia's, drawing something from her steady presence. When the floor opened for questions, the initial ones were predictably harsh. But as Dominic answered each with transparency and specific technical solutions, the tone gradually shifted. "This represents a significant investment," noted a reporter from the Financial Times. "How will this affect your bottom line?" "Security isn't an expense. It's an investment in trust," Dominic replied. "And trust is the foundation of everything we do." By the end of the hour, the mood in the room had transformed. As the communications team escorted the press out, Olivia overheard fragments of conversation that gave her hope. Unprecedented transparency and setting a new standard. Back in his office, Dominic loosened his tie, exhaling deeply. Well? Verdict? You were... She searched for the right word. Authentic. People respond to that. His phone began ringing almost immediately. Board members, clients, even competitors, wanting to discuss industry-wide security standards. By afternoon, their stock had stabilized, even regaining 3 percentage points. In the following days, they implemented their plan with relentless focus. Dominic personally called major clients, while the development team worked around the clock on the security overhaul. Olivia coordinated everything, becoming the nexus between departments that had previously operated in isolation. A week after the press conference, Eleanor Winters requested a meeting. She arrived with 2 other board members, her expression unreadable, as Dominic presented their progress. The market response has been better than anticipated, Eleanor acknowledged. Several major clients have not only stayed but expanded their contracts, citing their appreciation for the transparency. We've turned a corner, Dominic agreed cautiously. Eleanor studied him. Yes, you have. But not just with the company. Her gaze shifted to Olivia, who stood nearby. Your approach has evolved, Dominic. The board has noticed. After they left, promising continued support, Dominic turned to Olivia with a questioning look. What did she mean by that? Olivia hesitated, then decided on honesty. You've changed how you lead. Before you made brilliant decisions, but imposed them. Now you're building consensus, listening to different perspectives. She smiled slightly. You've stopped seeing people as merely functional parts of your machine. His expression softened. I had a good teacher. That evening, as the crisis officially entered recovery phase, Dominic suggested they celebrate with dinner, not takeout in the office, but at an actual restaurant. The invitation surprised Olivia, blurring the lines of their professional relationship in ways that both thrilled and concerned her. At a small bistro overlooking the water, away from the corporate world, they found themselves discussing everything, except work, books they'd read, places they hoped to visit, the small details of their lives that had never before seemed relevant to share. Why did you really stay? Dominic asked suddenly. The question that had lingered between them for weeks, finally spoken aloud. When everyone else was protecting their careers, you risked yours on a sinking ship. Olivia considered deflecting but found herself unwilling to retreat into professional distance. At first it was principle. I believed the company deserved better than abandonment. She took a sip of wine, gathering courage. But after a while, it was about you. Me? His voice was quiet, intent. I saw someone fighting for something that mattered. Someone who, beneath all the corporate armor, cared deeply. She met his gaze directly. I wanted to fight alongside that person. The admission hung between them, charged with possibilities neither had allowed themselves to consider before the crisis. Walking back to where their cars were parked, Dominic stopped suddenly. I have a confession, he said, turning to face her, in the gentle evening light. I knew about your master's thesis, the one on predictive analytics and software development. Olivia stared at him, confused. How? When? 2 years ago, I was reviewing candidates for the strategy team and saw your application. His expression was apologetic. I blocked your transfer. You what? The revelation stung more than she expected. Why would you do that? Because I couldn't imagine running the company without you, he admitted. It was selfish. I told myself you were too valuable in your current role, but the truth is, he hesitated. I was afraid of losing you. The confession transformed her understanding of their past, complicating her feelings about their present. Part of her wanted to be angry, but another part recognized the significance of his admission, and the man he had become who could acknowledge his mistake. I should have supported your growth instead of containing it, he continued when she remained silent. I'm sorry, Olivia. The use of her first name, so rare from him, underscored the shifting boundaries between them. What happens now? She asked quietly. Dominic looked at her, uncertainty and hope mingling in his expression. I don't know, he answered honestly. But I want to find out. As they parted that night, the future of Westfield Innovations looked brighter than it had in weeks. But for Dominic and Olivia, the most significant rebuilding wasn't happening in the company, but in the space between them, where something unexpected was taking root among the foundations of crisis. Beyond titles, 2 months after the security crisis began, Westfield Innovations had not merely survived, it had transformed. The company's stock had recovered to pre-crisis levels, bolstered by industry recognition of their security initiative. What had started as damage control had evolved into a competitive advantage, with potential clients specifically citing Westfield's transparency as a reason for choosing their services. On a crisp autumn morning, Olivia stood before the floor-to-ceiling, windows of the executive floor, watching the city come alive below. So much had changed, yet routines remained. She still arrived before dawn, still prepared for the day with meticulous attention to detail. The difference was in the purpose behind her actions, and in the man she now worked alongside rather than simply for. You're here early. Dominic's voice came from behind her. Even for you! She turned to find him holding 2 coffee cups, offering one to her, a small but significant reversal of their long-established pattern. Board presentation. Today, she reminded him, accepting the coffee, I wanted to review the quarterly projections once more. Always thorough, he said with appreciation. But that's not why I asked you to come in early. He led her to the conference room, where portfolio folders were arranged at each seat for the upcoming meeting. At her usual place beside his, however, sat a different folder, thicker, with her name embossed on its cover. What's this? She asked, picking it up. Open it, Dominic encouraged, watching her intently. Inside was a formal offer letter. The position listed made her breath catch, Chief Strategy Officer. I don't understand, she said, looking up at him. Jenkins is our CSO. Jenkins is leaving for a startup in Austin, Dominic explained. He gave notice last week. Olivia stared at the offer, emotions conflicting within her, professional triumph mixed with personal uncertainty. Is this because of us? She gestured vaguely between them, acknowledging the undefinable shift in their relationship over recent weeks, dinners that stretched late into evening, conversations that wandered far beyond work, moments of connection that neither had put into words. This is because you're brilliant, he said firmly. Because during the crisis, you demonstrated strategic thinking that outpaced executives with twice your experience. Because it's long overdue. He moved closer. The board suggested it, Olivia. They saw what I've been too selfish to acknowledge. Your talent belongs in our leadership. She sat down, processing the magnitude of the opportunity. This would change everything. Yes, he agreed quietly. But some things have already changed. Haven't they? The question hung between them, acknowledging the careful dance they'd been performing. Professional colleagues by day, something more complex in the margins of their interactions. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course, he nodded. The board doesn't need an answer until next week. Throughout the day, Olivia moved through her responsibilities with practiced efficiency, but her mind continuously returned to the offer letter tucked in her desk drawer. By evening, as the office emptied, she found herself drawn to the roof terrace, a space typically reserved for corporate events, but peaceful in its abandonment. She didn't hear Dominic approach until he spoke. I thought I might find you here. The setting sun cast golden light across the cityscape, illuminating his features as he joined her at the railing. They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes. "I've been thinking about what you said," Dominic finally spoke, "about how the crisis changed me. You were right, but not entirely." He turned to face her. "I didn't suddenly become someone new. You just made me want to be the best version of who I already was." The honesty in his voice made her meet his gaze. "Dominic, please let me finish," he requested gently. "For years, I measured success in stock prices and market share. I thought leading meant making decisions alone, carrying the weight alone." He shook his head. "When everything started falling apart, you showed me a different kind of strength, one that comes from connection, from trust, from seeing people as they truly are." He took a deep breath. "I understand if you need to decline the position, if you feel it complicates things between us. But I want you to know that regardless of your decision, I'm grateful for what you've shown me about business, about leadership." His voice softened. "About myself." Olivia considered her words carefully before speaking. "When I first started working for you, I admired your vision but resented your methods. I stayed because I believed in what Westfield could be." She smiled slightly. "I never expected to eventually believe in who you could be, too." "And who is that?" he asked, vulnerability evident in his question. "Someone who builds rather than demands. Someone who sees value in others beyond their utility." She moved closer. "Someone I've come to care for far beyond any professional boundary." The admission hung in the air between them, finally giving voice to what had been growing since those first crisis-filled days when they'd truly seen each other. "If I take this position," she continued, "I want it to be clear to everyone, especially the board, that I earned it through capability, not connection." "Your work speaks for itself," he assured her. "Anyone who's worked with you these past months knows that." "And us?" she asked quietly. "What happens with us if I join the executive team?" Dominic reached for her hand, his touch tentative but intentional. "That's entirely up to you. We can establish professional boundaries, focus entirely on rebuilding the company." He paused, his expression softening. "Or we can acknowledge that some partnerships transcend titles and organizational charts." "That sounds suspiciously romantic coming from Dominic Westfield," she teased, though her heart raced at his words. "Perhaps near catastrophe has made me sentimental," he admitted with a small smile. "Or perhaps I'm finally seeing what matters most." As the last light faded from the sky, Olivia made her decision. Not just about the position, but about the man standing before her, no longer the untouchable CEO, but a partner who had walked through fire alongside her. "I'll take the position," she said firmly. "And I want to see where this leads," she added, squeezing his hand. The following Monday, Olivia attended her first executive meeting, not as an assistant taking notes, but as Chief Strategy Officer presenting her vision for Westfield's future. The board members, who had once barely acknowledged her, now leaned forward, engaged by her innovative approaches and clear analysis. Eleanor Winters, watching the transformation in the company's leadership, commented to Dominic after the meeting, "You found quite a partner in Ms. Reed." "No," Dominic corrected thoughtfully. "She was always there. I just finally learned to see her." 6 months later, at Westfield's annual gala, industry leaders and employees gathered to celebrate the company's remarkable recovery and growth. Dominic took the stage, his presence commanding yet somehow more approachable than in years past. "A year ago, Westfield faced its greatest challenge," he began. "We survived not through any single person's brilliance, but through partnership, transparency, and a willingness to transform crisis into opportunity." His eyes found Olivia in the crowd, and the look they exchanged spoke volumes about the journey they had taken together, from boss and assistant to equals in both business and life. "The strongest foundations," he continued, "are often built where we least expect them, in moments of vulnerability, in seeing value where others don't look, in finding courage to move beyond the roles we've assigned ourselves. Later that evening, as they slipped away from the celebration to the quiet of the rooftop terrace that had become their special place, Dominic took Olivia's hands in his. "A year ago, I wouldn't have believed this possible," he admitted. "I was too focused on achievement to recognize what was right in front of me." "We both were," she acknowledged. "I was so determined to prove myself professionally that I guarded against anything that might seem like a distraction." "And now?" he asked, his voice gentle in the moonlight. Olivia smiled, the confidence of knowing her worth, both professionally and personally, evident in her expression. "Now I understand that the most meaningful success stories aren't found in boardrooms or balance sheets." "Where are they found?" he asked, though his eyes suggested he already knew her answer. "In the spaces between titles," she replied, closing the distance between them. "Beyond the roles we play and the expectations we carry. In recognizing the person who sees you, truly sees you, when everyone else has looked away." As their lips met beneath the stars that had witnessed their transformation, Olivia Reed and Dominic Westfield stepped fully into a story neither could have anticipated, one where professional brilliance and personal connection weren't competing forces but complementary strengths, building something far more enduring than either could have created alone. In the end, their greatest innovation wasn't in technology or business strategy, but in reimagining what leadership could be when founded on partnership, and what love could become when built on mutual respect and shared vision. A blueprint for success that transcended the boundaries of work and heart, creating something truly revolutionary in both.